welcome to Public Forum. I'm Amandra Bhatt. Today we talk about the latest in the ongoing crisis in Syria. And to discuss the Syrian crisis, we are joined in our studios by three distinguished guests. Please welcome Professor Sreeram Chaulia, who's a Dean with the Jindal School of International Affairs. Welcome to Public Forum, Professor Chaulia. Sitting next to him is Dr. Wael Awad, Bureau Chief with SANA, that is the Syrian Arab News Agency. Welcome to Public Forum, Dr. Awad. And we are also joined by Sanjay Kapoor, Senior Journalist, Editor, Hard News. But Professor Chaulia, how do you look at the United Nations report? Do you think they've managed to not take a position when the conflict is at a delicate stage, or do you think it is loaded in the favor of the US and Western powers?
I think the language of the report is trying not to assign culpability, but rather, for the UN, they also have to think about whether anything they do could become part of a slippery slope leading to Western military attacks. I don't think the UN approves it at all. In fact, the UN is wary of a Western military attack that would bypass the Security Council. So I think Ban Ki-moon is very clear about that, and he has already said that it would be obviously illegal as per international law. But if you look at the circumstances around the attack itself and the previous attack, especially the one in Aleppo way back in March, it's clear that these could be, and in fact Western intelligence agents off the record have been saying this, that this could have been a kind of what they call a false flag attack, which is basically meant to rally Western intervention to support the rebels, using an alibi or an excuse.
Right.
So that is possible. It's very much possible. And as far as the the delivery mechanisms are concerned for the attack themselves of August, they are not very sophisticated. So it doesn't require a lot. And given the amount of munitions that the rebels are getting from Turkey, it's not far-fetched to imagine that they could have also done it. And then if you go back to the previous attack, the Russians actually did a very thorough investigation. So they have a right to claim that this is somewhat haphazard. The Russians produced some 100-page analysis of the al-Asal attacks of March and submitted it in July, right? And in which, of course, given their political position, they are showing that it is the handiwork of rebels. If you see, Western intelligence agencies off the record are saying things like, it is not really a slam dunk case. Slam dunk is the word that the Bush administration had used for claiming that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. So they are saying it's not really an open and shut case off the record, but because of political pressures, especially from Israel as well as from Qatar and Saudi Arabia, who want an attack and to overthrow the regime, I think they're being pushed. But I think Obama has been somewhat sane, amidst this madness. And I think all the steps he's taken so far are, he himself, it is clear, does not want this war. But he's being pushed by all these right-wing allies as well as people within the Congress like John McCain,
the CIA themselves,
and the agencies who might benefit from this. So I think it's a big tug of war. So Syria, in a way, because of its unique, diverse mosaic, has already divided the world. Not only Russia, Iran one side, and West and Arab countries on the other side, but also within the United States, within Turkey, within Arab countries, there's a lot of turmoil. People are saying, this is wrong, this war should not go on. But the regimes are pushing for it and funneling it.
Professor Chaulia, President Obama says that he believes that it was only the threat of force which made a diplomatic solution possible. What would you say? Or you think it's a great success for Moscow?
Well, from the Russian thinking, you also have to go back a little bit to the Kosovo War of 1999. Then Yeltsin was in power, but very dependent on the West economically for aid and all these things. They also threatened to retaliate in the Baltic by sending their navy which is a long-time ally of Russia. But once the NATO bombing began, Russia just stood by, and in fact even the Chinese embassy in Belgrade was attacked. Whether deliberately or accidentally is now a controversy. So now, Russia's consolidated its alliances a lot more in the last 10-15 years. The commodities boom has also made it grow, and it has created national confidence. So Putin's foreign policy comes out of this. One is, of course, total distaste for Western liberal values and interventions in the name of human rights. and humanitarian. And then secondly, they are also, you see, it's interesting, the Chinese media have praised Putin for his role over the last 1 week and have made a very pertinent point. They said, President Putin could take a courageous stand, and they said, you know, his wisdom was amazing and all that. He could do it because Russia is not so economically interdependent with the West, while China is. Remember? Chinese investment, Chinese treasury bills. So the Chinese, although they have been in the backdrop, are not taking a very anti-Western, vocal anti-Western position. But when it comes to Security Council vote, definitely they will go against the West. But so they have ceded in a way the leadership this time to the Russians, and they are patting them from behind saying, well done. And they are also saying the reason we are not taking the lead on this is because of our economic interdependence with the West. So Russia in that sense structurally is not so dependent. Therefore Russia pushes for BRICS. Therefore Russia pushes for an alternative non-Western international order. Therefore Russia pushes for multi-polar world. And I think in a sense this is a consummation of that. I agree with Dr. Awad that, you know, the move towards multipolarity has an unlikely hero, which is Vladimir Putin. Unlikely in the sense that, you know, he was this ex-KGB spy and he was mostly trying to consolidate domestic control and making some noise. But the Russia of 1999, of 2013 is different. Today they have bark and bite. They spoke about how they will actually use the Tartus, the naval base that they have in Syria to consolidate and, if necessary, have battleships there. Right now they don't have that category of warships. So in a way they have said that, you know, there is a limit to what you can do. It's not so easy for the Americans to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Mediterranean Sea from aircraft carriers if there is a Russian fleet ahead of it. Right. So that's the point. You know, the Americans understand this. You know, you back up whatever threats or counter threats or proposals with actual military force. And I think the Russians have shown it this time. And that's why they have been more credible.
And do you think this is something that is going to affect America's influence in the region?
Well, you know, the ability to even convince Qatar and Saudi seems to be pretty low. I mean, I was talking to somebody from the Obama administration policy planning staff of the State Department. I said, you guys, you know, why are you allowing Qatar and Saudi and Turkey to just keep on funneling these jihadist elements? I said, well, what can we do? I mean, there's beyond a point we have no control over them. So if they have no control and ability to enforce their will even on their so-called allies in the region, I mean, already it's at a low point, right, the influence. And in a way, I have always said that Obama is good for America because he's kind of like a reality check for all those people who are still in the Cold War mentality saying, you know, we're going to go attack and we're going to occupy and have spheres of influence. Obama is actually saying, listen, we are not the America of the unipolar era. So he's good. He's like reminding people to be realistic. And I think that's a good sign.
Dr. Chaulia, what are your views? Do you think there is a good chance of the Russian plan succeeding?
I think so, because see, if you look at the balance of power, it's mostly decided by conventional weaponry. And I'm sure the Russians can always replenish the Syrian state's armor through more conventional deliveries. And so in that sense, I think the regime is not critically dependent on those 1,000 tons of chemical weapons they are supposed to have for prosecuting the war or for winning it. In fact, as we have discussed earlier, there are doubts about the strategic benefit of even using these weapons by the state. So I think the ambitious target of a quick handover of and opening of the sites for inspection may be unrealistic because, you know, 6 months is probably short.
Right.
If you look at the American chemical weapons stockpile itself, they signed the convention on the chemical weapons in 1997 or 98, and it's now almost 15 years. They've still not dismantled. They had like 35 to 40,000 tons of chemical weapons in the US itself. And this is at peace, you know, there's no major armed conflict going on. And the state has control over all the borders. So in spite of that, they have been taking so long to dismantle. So I think it may take longer. But the main thing is, I fear that between now and these 6 months when this process goes on, there's going to be allegation of another chemical attack or something like that. And then they'll say, you know, this process has to fall apart and Assad is not listening and we have to teach him a lesson. So I think that is the real danger, because what happens is that now that they have raised the chemical weapons issue to a fever pitch and made it so central, even though it is not central to the actual war that's going on.
Right.
Now that this can become the casus belli, the basis on which they can attack.
Right.
So this is where I think we have to be watchful, and the voices who are calling for more solid evidence and for more neutral evidence must be, given prominence across the world, including in our own country, because we don't want this kind of, attack by ruse or attack using flawed evidence, because we've seen that in the past. And so the truth probably lies somewhere in between, in the sense that the regime has also used a lot of firepower, aerial bombing and so on. It has led to a lot of civilian casualties. I'm not denying that. But if you see the atrocities are happening on the ground, where people are physically being manhandled, people are being shot to death just for being what they call nusairi, as in if you're Alawite, just line up on the side of the road and we'll shoot you dead. So this is the kind of poisonous rhetoric that will outlive the war, because what they are now doing is they are creating the Sunni-Shiite divide and making it so poisonous. It was never that bad earlier. Right. So I think we have to think about long-term consequences for intersocial relations. What is this war going to do to the so-called Shia-Sunni cohabitation that's existed for centuries?
Professor Chaulia, if we could now focus on the larger Syrian conflict, the civil war that has been going on there, this isn't something that one can settle in the UN. This diplomatic solution, this deal that has been worked out between the US and Russia, it only deals with chemical weapons and the red line that has been set by the US. How do we deal with this larger conflict?
I've been maintaining that you need actually for a demilitarization where all these guerrilla groups which are being heavily armed by Turkey, by Saudi, by Qatar, and by some of the Europeans and the Western agencies, you need them to withdraw. And then in return, the Iranians can also, and the Russians, that we will not continue to pump more conventional weaponry into the state. And that is when you have a basis for some kind of an agreement or solution to come out. So it's actually not the removal of chemical weapons, it's the removal of the conventional killing machines that have been inserted into this region. And for that to happen, I think the big things are, as I said before, and Dr. Awad has hinted at that, internal changes within some of these neighboring countries of Syria is going to make a difference in the long run to ending this war. Because currently many of these regimes are denying their own people legitimate democratic freedoms. And imagine Saudi Arabia talking about human rights. I mean, that's a joke, right? I mean, frankly speaking. So we need, transformation in these societies, because that's when you can have a real Arab Spring. I had asked even 2011, can this be actually, can you just have democracy in Egypt or Tunisia and not in the rest of the region? Can it be partial? If you think about revolutions and democratization waves, they happen across regions, sweeping the whole set of nation states. If you have 2 or 3 left, then they can become the basis for counter-revolutionary actions. So what we are seeing in Syria, I think, is a reflection also of the incompleteness of the so-called Arab Spring and the conservative forces which are funneling fundamentalism in the region. Until those are broken, I think they will keep on pumping weapons into the country and militarizing it. So the only way for me is to actually, for the principals who are using the proxies, to step back. And I think it has to be mutual. So, and this of course depends upon the larger configurations, because even Qatar and Saudi are not exactly on the same page. They are funding different sets of rebels, and each of them has its own agenda in Syria.
Right.
So there's so much division and the fog of war. So fragmentation is really, really complete in this case. So in order to create some kind of semblance of normalcy, you need to create, you need to at least have some kind of clarity about 2 sides, not 7 or 8 sides, and then both sides agreeing that we will demilitarize. For me, that's the first step. The chemical weapons agreement is not going to end this war, even if it is implemented. And as I said before, it could actually be a trigger for war. So it's not a red herring. I am not insensitive to the deaths of 1,400 people or even the previous gassing that has happened. But what I'm trying to say is that in the larger picture, I think we have to attack the root of the problem, which has been the irresponsible behavior of some of these neighboring countries like Turkey, Saudi and Qatar.
Professor Chaulia, how do you see the road ahead now? Geneva too, perhaps?
Well, I hope this chemical weapons deal will open channels for direct negotiations between Iran and the West. I think that's important.
I think Rouhani is meeting the President Obama today. I saw it on the Twitter that something like that might be happening.
If the Ayatollahs are also in favor of a settlement, there's a chance. Because, direct US-Iran rapprochement will suddenly end all this, the basis for destabilizing Syria. I think it will reduce the power of the anti-Iran lobby in the United States to say that this is the first step and then we'll go after the Ayatollahs. So I think it's important that step happens, and I hope that I'm cautiously optimistic that may help also untangle some of this real dense mess that we've gotten into in Syria.
It's time for me to thank my guests now for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you.